Your air conditioner is lying to you, not the company that built it, the entire idea of it. Because right now in Amish communities across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana, families are living through the exact same triple-digit heat waves you are, inside homes that have never once paid an electric bill. No solar panels, no batteries, no generator humming in the yard, just dirt. Ordinary dirt, packed the right way, sitting 10 feet below your feet, at a temperature your air conditioner burns $400 a month trying to fake. Builders call it earth berming. Farmers just called it common sense. And the part almost nobody talks about is that a basic version of this trick can be built for pocket change and raw materials because the material doing all the work isn't concrete or copper or refrigerant. It's the ground you're already standing on. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly why the Department of Energy has quietly confirmed this cuts cooling costs by up to 70%, why a business complex buried under Kansas City is saving companies $35,000 a month in energy, and why a trick older than the pyramids is only now making a comeback in a country that forgot it. Here's the number that should make you angry. The average American household now spends over $2,000 a year just to keep their home from feeling like an oven. That number climbs every single summer. Heat waves are getting longer, power grids are getting shakier, and every time your air conditioner clicks on, a meter somewhere is spinning, quietly draining your bank account, 1 degree at a time. And the frustrating part is that the fix has been sitting under your lawn this entire time. You've just never been told to look down. So let's start with the physics, because this isn't folklore and it isn't a lifestyle choice. It's measurable. Above ground, air temperature swings wildly, 40, 50, even 60 degrees between a winter night and a summer afternoon. But go down just 10 feet and something strange happens. The ground stops caring what the weather is doing. A study out of the University of Houston tracked soil temperature at 10 feet deep for an entire year and found something remarkable. In summer, the ground sat at 75.1 degrees. In winter, 75.9. Less than 1 degree of difference in a place where the air above swung by 25 degrees or more. Go down 30 feet, and the ground locks into what scientists call the mean Earth temperature, a number that barely moves at all, season after season, decade after decade. In the Rocky Mountains and the northern plains, that number sits around 45 degrees. In the deep south, it climbs toward the high 70s. Either way, it is dramatically closer to comfortable than the scorching air baking your roof shingles in July. This is the exact same principle that makes geothermal heat pumps work. It's the same reason a wine cellar stays cool without a single moving part. And it's the same reason your grandparents, or their grandparents, dug a hole in the ground and called it a root cellar. The ground isn't cold. It isn't hot. It's average. An average, when it's 95 degrees outside, feels like a miracle. Now here's where it gets interesting, because this isn't a new discovery. It's one of the oldest building techniques human beings have ever used. Archaeologists have found evidence of turf and earth-insulated shelters dating back 15,000 years, built by hunters in Europe, who had no science, no permits, and no electricity. Just an instinct that the ground stayed warmer than the wind. On the Orkney Islands, off the coast of Scotland, there's a settlement called Skara Brae, built into the earth roughly 5,000 years ago. It's still standing, still structurally sound. While the wooden farmhouses built 100 years ago down the road from it have long since rotted away. And in this country, the closest living link to that tradition isn't some obscure architectural movement. It's Amish and Pennsylvania Dutch farm families, who for 300 years relied on spring houses and root cellars for exactly this kind of passive refrigeration. A spring house was built directly over a natural spring, letting ice-cold groundwater flow underneath a stone floor, keeping milk, butter, and meat fresh at a steady 50 degrees without a single watt of electricity. Root cellars did the same thing for vegetables, dug several feet underground where frost could never reach and summer heat could never penetrate. These weren't backup plans. For nearly 200 years, before rural electric lines reached the countryside, this was the only refrigeration most American families had. And it worked every single day, in every single season, with zero maintenance beyond a door hinge. Now fast forward to 1973. The oil embargo hits, gas prices spike, heating bills triple almost overnight, and suddenly the entire country is desperate for a way to stay warm and cool without burning through a paycheck. Architects and researchers start looking backward for answers, and they land on the same idea the Amish had been quietly using the whole time: build with the earth, not against it. The University of Minnesota opened something called the Underground Space Center, and in 1978 they published a single book on earth-sheltered housing design. That book sold over 250,000 copies and was translated into 4 languages. Before that book existed, there were only about 50 true earth-sheltered homes in the entire United States. Within a few years, that number passed 3,000. And the Department of Energy still stands behind the results today, stating plainly that earth-sheltered homes can cut heating and cooling costs by 50 to 70% compared to a standard stick-built house of the same size. Some builders, backed by their own long-term data, report savings as high as 80%. If you think this only works for a hippie dome house buried in a hillside somewhere in Montana, let me show you where it's actually being used today. On a massive commercial scale, by companies you've definitely heard of. Underneath Kansas City, Missouri, there's a place called Subtropolis. It's an old limestone mine, carved out over decades, that's now been converted into 55 million square feet of usable business space, sitting up to 160 feet underground. And here's the number that matters. That cave naturally holds a steady 65 to 70 degrees all year, without a single furnace or air conditioner running. The United States Postal Service stores its entire historic stamp collection down there. Original film reels from classic Hollywood movies are archived in that cave because the temperature never fluctuates enough to damage them. Ford upfits trucks in an area nicknamed Automotive Alley because the climate down there is more stable than any factory floor above ground. One company that moved their operations underground reported saving $35,000 a month on energy costs alone. Not per year, per month. Businesses down there report using up to 75% less electricity than they would in an identical building sitting in the sun. And if you want proof this works even in the most brutal climates on Earth, look at Coober Pedy in the middle of the Australian outback. Surface temperatures there regularly blow past 115 degrees. It is, by almost any measure, one of the harshest places people have chosen to live. And more than half the town has simply moved underground. Homes called dugouts are carved directly into sandstone hillsides, and inside them, the temperature sits at a steady, comfortable 72 to 75 degrees every single day, with zero air conditioning. Shops, churches, even hotels down there run the exact same way. While tourists on the surface are sweating through their shirts, the locals are sitting comfortably in a cave they carved themselves, paying nothing to stay cool. Even nature figured this out long before humans did. In Zimbabwe, termites build enormous mounds that somehow keep their internal fungus farms locked at a precise 87 degrees, no matter whether it's 35 degrees at night or 104 during the day outside. In 1996, an architect named Mick Pierce studied exactly how those mounds pulled this off and used the same passive airflow principles to design a real office building in Harare called the Eastgate Center. That building has no conventional air conditioning system installed at all, none, and it uses about 90% less energy for ventilation than a comparable modern office tower. If termites can build a climate-controlled home out of dirt with a brain the size of a pinhead, there's no reason a homeowner with a shovel and an afternoon can't do something similar. So let's get into how this actually works, because the mechanism is simpler than almost anything else you'll ever build into a house. The most basic version of this trick is called an earth tube, sometimes called an earth-to-air heat exchanger. You bury a length of smooth-walled pipe several feet underground, ideally at least 6 to 8 feet down, where that stable temperature zone begins. One end sits outside, drawing in fresh air. The other end runs into your home. As outside air travels through that buried pipe, the surrounding earth pulls the heat right out of it in summer, or adds warmth to it in winter. So by the time that air reaches your living room, it's already been preconditioned by the ground for free. No compressor, no refrigerant, no moving parts beyond a simple fan, and in some designs, not even that, just natural convection doing the work on its own. The materials for a basic setup are almost embarrassingly cheap. Smooth plastic drainage pipe, available at any hardware store, costs roughly $1 a foot. A length that would have cost you $3 to buy 50 years ago, adjusted for materials today, is still one of the cheapest components in your entire house. The real cost isn't the pipe. It's the labor of getting it in the ground, which is exactly why Amish and homesteading communities never saw this as expensive. They had the land, the time, and the willingness to dig. But there are 3 details that separate a system that works flawlessly for decades from one that turns into a moldy mess, and almost nobody talks about them, because most videos on this topic stop at bury a pipe and enjoy the savings. First, the pipe has to be smooth on the inside, not corrugated. Ribbed pipe traps moisture in every little groove, and moisture sitting still in the dark is exactly what mold needs to take hold. Second, the entire length has to be sloped continuously, even a 1 to 3% grade toward a drainage point. Warm, humid air meeting cool pipe walls creates condensation no matter what. That's just physics. But if the water can run downhill and drain out, it never becomes a problem. Third, every joint in that pipe needs to be sealed properly, because in certain regions, an improperly sealed earth tube can pull radon gas up out of the soil and straight into your living room. One earth-sheltered homeowner learned this the hard way after years of enjoying his system, only to have an air quality test come back showing radon levels equivalent to smoking several packs of cigarettes a day. That is not a reason to avoid this technique. It's a reason to build it correctly the first time, with sealed joints and proper venting, the same way the Amish built spring houses to drain properly instead of turning into swamps. If you wanted to test a small version of this yourself, without touching the structure of your house at all, the pattern most homesteaders follow is straightforward. Dig a trench along a shaded, well-drained part of your property, run smooth pipe at a steady downward slope, backfill it, and vent one end into a window unit, a shed, or a greenhouse before ever considering tying it into a main house system. Test it for a season. Watch what the temperature actually does before you commit to anything permanent. That's exactly how the original builders of these systems worked 100 years ago, without an engineering degree, just careful observation and patience. And once you understand the basic earth tube, there's a more advanced version of this trick that almost nobody in this country has ever heard of, and it takes the same idea and pushes it further. In 1983, an inventor named John Haight developed something called passive annual heat storage, nicknamed the umbrella house. Instead of just burying a home in dirt, which sits at that cold, stable ground temperature, Haight's method places an insulated waterproof layer, essentially a giant underground umbrella, extending 10 to 20 feet outward from the house in every direction, buried just a few feet down. That umbrella blocks rain and cold from ever reaching the earth directly beneath and around the home. So instead of the ground resetting to that same 45 or 50 degree baseline every winter, summer heat soaks into that protected earth and simply stays there, slowly radiating back into the house all winter long. In his first monitored prototype, built in Missoula, Montana, the ground beneath that umbrella warmed from its natural 45 degrees up to 64 degrees within a single season. A more recent build in southern France, tracked over 3 full years, held steady indoor temperatures between 64 and 77 degrees year-round, with no mechanical heating or cooling system running at all. Not once. That's not a lucky house. That's engineering applied to dirt. Now, let's be honest about the trade-offs, because a video that only tells you the good news isn't giving you the full picture, and you deserve better than that. A full earth-sheltered home costs roughly 10 to 20% more to build up front than a standard house, mainly because the walls need reinforcement to hold back tons of soil, and waterproofing has to be done correctly from day one. This works best in climates with big temperature swings and lower humidity. Think the Rockies, the Great Plains, the high desert, and it's less of an automatic win in already humid regions, where trapped moisture can become its own headache if it isn't managed. And banks, appraisers, and mortgage underwriters are sometimes less familiar with earth-sheltered construction, which can occasionally complicate financing or resale. None of that erases the 70% savings number. It just means this is a serious construction decision, not a weekend hack for a full house, though a simple earth tube retrofit is a completely different, much smaller undertaking that almost anyone with land can attempt. And here's a benefit almost nobody mentions, because it has nothing to do with your electric bill and everything to do with your safety. Earth-sheltered and bermed homes are dramatically more disaster-resistant. Builders in Minnesota have reported homes taking direct tornado hits and needing nothing more than a fresh coat of paint, because there's almost no exposed structure for the wind to grab onto. Hail does essentially nothing to a roof covered in soil and grass. That's exactly why insurance companies often charge less to cover these homes. The same trick that slashes your cooling bill also happens to be one of the most storm-resistant ways to build a house in America. So why does this matter so much more than just saving money on your electric bill? Because every other cooling solution you've ever been sold has a hidden expiration date. Air conditioners break down after 10 or 15 years. Solar panels degrade. Batteries lose capacity. Every single one of those systems eventually needs to be repaired, replaced, or thrown away. And every single one of them keeps costing you money for as long as you own it. The ground doesn't do that. It doesn't wear out. It doesn't need a filter changed or a refrigerant refill. It was here millions of years before your house was built, and it will still be sitting at that same stable temperature millions of years after every appliance in your kitchen has been replaced 5 times over. That's the actual meaning behind the word permanently in this video's title. This isn't a trick that saves you money for a season. It's a trick that keeps paying you back for as long as the dirt stays in the ground, which, give or take, is forever. The Amish never called this innovation. They called it Tuesday. It was just how you kept butter from spoiling and how you survived August without complaining about it, because there was nothing else to do. But somewhere between rural electrification and central air conditioning, this country traded a permanent free solution for a monthly bill. And most people never even noticed the trade happened. The ground under your yard right now is sitting at a nearly constant temperature, quietly doing nothing, while your air conditioner works overtime just a few feet above it. The physics has been proven by the Department of Energy. The engineering has been tested for 50 years by universities, and the concept has been proven for 5,000 years by human beings, with nothing but hand tools and patience. If this video opened your eyes to something you'd never been taught, that's exactly the point. Subscribe if you want more of these forgotten low-tech tricks that quietly outperform modern solutions. Because there are dozens more where this came from. And the next one might save you even more than 70%.